Here is a truth we were never meant to say out loud. Before we discuss weapons, before we discuss funding, before we discuss jets, ships, or troop counts, we must first discuss design. Because Africa's military problem has never been courage. It's never been manpower. It's never been intelligence, discipline, or sacrifice. Africa's military problem is that it was designed to remain incomplete. And this was not by accident, it wasn't incompetence, but it was done structurally. From the earliest post-independence security arrangements, African forces were shaped to exist in fragments. Air power separated from land power, armies confined to internal security, navies reduced to coastal monitoring. So this was not done because Africa misunderstood power. It was done because integrated power produces leverage, and leverage was never meant to be African held. This episode exists because that design has reached its expiration date. And remember, if you want more Africa First stories the Western media avoids, hit subscribe. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth behind them. And by the end of this video, you should understand why Africa needs a plan for military sovereignty and how this can be accomplished. So, war is a system. It's not a branch, right? Modern warfare is not won by individual services. It's won by systems acting in unity. So, air power without land control intimidates, but it doesn't decide, right? Land power without air and intelligence bleeds without leverage. Naval power without command integration observes without authority, right? Every serious military power on earth organizes around joint effects, not branch identity. So Africa, by contrast, has been trained to think compartmentally. Separate commands, separate doctrines, separate planning horizons. So this is not a technical gap. It's a doctrinal restriction. Fragmented forces can be influenced. Integrated forces must be negotiated with, right? So when it comes to air power, we'll say, right? Africa operates modern combat aircraft. African pilots are highly skilled, highly trained. African bases are permanent. Supersonic platforms operate daily across the continent. And the myth that Africa flies obsolete junk is false, and it's deliberately reported. But air power today is not just about flight. It's about pre-contact dominance. Who detects who first? Who fuses information fastest? Who decides autonomously? Who engages from outside retaliation range? So Africa is allowed aircraft. We're allowed speed, but we're not consistently allowed system level parity, which is systemic first contact advantage. So as a result, African air forces are forced into shorter engagement envelopes, reactive interception, and visible deterrence instead of decisive denial. So this is not about pilot skill, it's about controlled access to the kill chain, right? So air power alone never produces sovereignty. Air power detached from ground maneuver and autonomous command produces spectacle, but not control. So bombing disrupts, but it doesn't govern. Surveillance observes, but it doesn't secure. So deterrence without credible follow-through collapses under pressure. And this is why African air forces are tolerated but rarely feared. So without integrated land power and independent command authority, air power remains political or politically containable. And that containment is deliberate. So one of Africa's most misrepresented strengths is actually ground strength, right? Ground power. So if there's one domain that proves African military credibility, it has to be the ground. African soldiers fight in environments others study in classrooms, right? Dense cities, vast rural terrain, desert supply lines, jungles, mountains, and border compression. So Our African forces are experienced on the ground. They're not experienced by any means, but we're system denied. So globally, um, African armies are framed as manpower pools. So peacekeepers, stabilizers, counterinsurgency labor, rarely as maneuver forces designed to shape strategic outcomes. Because modern land power depends on persistent intelligence, precision fire, integrated air support, secure logistics, and unified command. African soldiers are repeatedly sent forward without the full architecture that protects modern forces elsewhere, right? Um, and that's not, it's not just bravery, right? It's structural exposure. So there's a major human cost of this system denial. So when ground forces lack integrated ISR and joint fires, battles become longer and bloodier. Casualties rise not because leadership fails, but because information is delayed, precision is restricted, and coordination is externally constrained. So Africa substitutes lives for other substitute systems, and that's not fate. That's a horrible and intentional design. So, naval power is where sovereignty quietly begins. We're surrounded by water here in Africa, right? Yet, Africa does not exercise full control over our maritime domain. Sea lanes, choke points, offshore energy, undersea cables, these are monitored, insured, and enforced largely outside of Africa, right? So outside of our African command. African navies are framed as patrol forces, not as sea denial forces. So not as trade protection instruments, not as escalation control mechanisms. Naval power is not about ships. It's about who controls movement, insurance, and interruption. So if Africa does not control these levers, sovereignty ends at the shoreline. So we have to look at fragmentation as a control mechanism because we don't lack force. We lack force coherence. So air forces plan nationally, armies plan domestically. Um, Intelligence is siloed, doctrines are borrowed, coordination is conditional. And this ensures our reactivity. History shows that no power fears isolated strength. They fear integrated talent, right? So, outsourcing security is the strategic trap. Africa has been encouraged to outsource survival, not alliances, survival. Through bases, contractors, advisory missions, foreign intelligence pipelines, and external logistics, security has been delegated. And this is framed as cooperation, whereas in reality, it's conditional permission, right? Outsourced power does not belong to the state using it. It belongs to the state authorizing it, right? So the true cost of outsourced power is, we're outsourcing military power trades, autonomy for access, decision making for approval, long-term security for short-term calm. It allows external actors to decide how far Africa may escalate, like how far we can take it, right? What weapons we can retain, when restraint becomes mandatory, and when African security concerns become inconvenient. So that's not partnership. That's dependency with enforcement. So then we have to look at sanctions. So sanctions are just war by other means. Sanctions are not moral judgments, they're weapons. They're deployed when a state demonstrates independent decision making, autonomous defense capability, resource control, or refusal to arbitrate sovereignty. Sanctions succeed where dependency exists. A military dependent on imported spares, software authorization, foreign maintenance, and external finance can be neutralized without a single shot fired. A self-sustaining force cannot. So there's a sanctioned security loop here. Africa repeatedly enters the same cycle. External security is invited, indigenous capability is delayed, dependency deepens, political divergence occurs, sanctions or conditionality follows, right? Readiness collapses, and not because of defeat, but because of logistic stops, right? Contracts freeze, insurance evaporates, and command autonomy disappears. So at that moment, sovereignty becomes theoretical. So self-defense can't be delegated. A state that cannot defend itself cannot negotiate freely. Every decision becomes conditional. Every alliance becomes leverage. Every disagreement becomes existential. And self-defense is not aggression. It's a strategic adulthood, right? No civilization outsourced survival and remains sovereign. So there's a developmental lie here. Africa's told development comes before security, and history actually shows the opposite. Development without security is extractable. Stability without autonomy is temporary. Cooperation without leverage is instruction. So security protects decision making, and decision making enables development. So what we need to be looking into is a continental military academy. Africa does not need 54 different doctrines. Africa needs one strategic language. A continental military academy would teach joint force systems thinking, sanctions resilience, integration before procurement, doctrine before prestige, and sovereignty as operational discipline. Not a donor institution, not a foreign model, a sovereignty foundry. So what sovereignty means in practice is sovereignty is not dominance, right? It's the ability to refuse coercion and survive the refusal. Africa does not need to outgun the world. Africa needs to make coercion expensive, uncertain, and slow. That's deterrence. So the final statement I'll make here is Africa's military challenge is not talent, it's architecture. And architecture begins in thought. Before steel, before budgets, before procurement, Africa's security future cannot be subcontracted. It cannot be guaranteed externally. It can't be approved into existence. No one will protect Africa more consistently than us Africans ourselves. And that's not isolation, that's sovereignty. So, MashaAllah, that's your African Insight for today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because we don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth behind them. I can't wait to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And this is Mr. Empower. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.